I'm just so nervous. Sorry to be this way.
Maybe it's because it matters to you.
It does matter. The idea of talking about Jackie, who's such an icon, and she means so much to so many people. And if I didn't get it right, I'd be really angry with myself.
Did you feel at all like you violated some code of friendship with her by writing what you've written?
You know, I must feel that way. That's probably what all my nerves are about.
She has been dead for 25 years.
It doesn't seem that way. It seems as if she's living inside me saying, "No, Carly, don't tell." Well, the first time I met her was at the Ocean Club, a restaurant here on the island. She was out with her son, and he came over to my table and said, "My mom is over. Would you like to meet her? She would really like to meet you." And so I went over to their table and had a little bit of a sit down with them. And it wasn't long after that she called me and asked me if I would write a memoir.
Because she was working at Doubleday at the time as an editor.
She just started to work at Doubleday. And of course, I was blown away by the aspect of doing such a ridiculous thing. I couldn't do it. It seemed much too close to write about my parents. And my mother was still alive then. I wrote about 80 pages and then I stopped and I called her and said, "Would you mind if I wrote children's books instead?" She said, "Let's give it a whirl." And so I wrote my first one, which is Amy the Dancing Bear.
When you went to write the second book and the two of you started talking about the financial deal, tell me what Jackie said.
And I said, "Well, let's just do it the way we did with the first book, where we just do it informally." And she said, "Well, what was that?" And I said, "Well, I got $25,000. And she said, "Oh, Carly, you got screwed." So funny. I didn't have the heart to tell her that she had made the deal.
What did she see in you?
Something that she wanted to have a little bit of herself, a free spirit who had the license to be in a rock and roll kind of way, loose as a goose. I could smoke a joint if I wanted to. She didn't have the license to be free. She was a naughty girl. And she liked that in herself, and she liked it in other people.
You reveal things about her and things about yourself that you've never, at least I've never heard you talk about before. You write about becoming too dependent on pills, about going to rehab. In fact, you had one phone call a day from the rehab facility, and that phone call went
to Jackie. She was like being the mother that I'd never had, and she was not judging me.
Your own mother, you write, you know she loved you and you loved her back, but she was not an easy person.
Putting it mildly.
When you won the Academy Award, she said,
"Darling, that's so fantastic. Congratulations. But there were so many other people who deserved it more. But you won."
But that was not the way Jackie interacted with you.
She just loved you unconditionally.
One of the things the two of you liked to do was go to the movies.
We would go to the movies on any Thursday afternoon that she was free, because that was her afternoon off. And so I would usually pick out the movie that we'd go to. I called her up and said, "What would you like to see?" And she said, "I don't know, you pick something." JFK, the movie JFK had just opened.
I saw a flash of light in the bushes, and then shots rang out.
And so I thought, oh my God, let's stay far and far away from that. Let's not go anywhere near a theater that was showing that. And I found one movie theater. That theater was playing Bugsy. And so I asked them to just look in the lobby, because I couldn't stand the thought that there would be a poster of JFK on our way in. Put a lot of pressure on myself to keep it going right.
Every precaution taken.
Every precaution taken. I got to the movie theater. She was there in the ladies' room waiting for me with her little Gucci shoes sticking out from underneath it.
This is where you'd usually meet, was in the ladies' room.
In the ladies' room, yes.
So that she didn't have to go in by herself.
Right. And we took our seats. And it's about 2 minutes before the movie was supposed to go on. The lights hadn't even started to dim yet. And I turned to her and I said, "So, have you seen JFK?" And she said, "No, Carly, no, no, no." She sunk back into her seat. And she was completely horrified, as was I. I mean, I couldn't say anything. I went home, just sat there just crying. I just was so upset that I had made such a faux pas. And when I got home, I wrote her a letter about Mr. Nose, who was a friend of our family's, who had come to dinner once. And his name was really Louis Untermeyer. And my father said, "Now, girls, you be very, very careful not to mention this guy's nose. He's got a very big nose." So then, of course, you know what happened. "How do you do, Mr. Nose?" So I wrote Jackie that story, and she just wrote me back saying how incredibly thoughtful I was, and she totally understood, and of course I was exonerated.
Didn't she even propose Mr. Nose might be a good children's story?
Yes, she did. She was the epitome of etiquette, and at the same time had this other slice where she could go off and be hilarious and play a joke on you. She went with me to a recording session that I did with Placido Domingo, singing a song for his album, The Broadway I Love. And we did a tune from Miss Saigon called The Last Night of the World. And we were out there in the studio in Queens singing side by side. It was so much fun, and it was he taught me how to sustain a note by pressing in my diaphragm like that, and I taught him to move with the beat of the rhythm of the song, which he was doing it more operatically, and I suggested a couple of rhythmic changes. And we just had so much fun. And then the next morning I got a letter from Placido in the mail. He said, "Darling Carlita, you are please be my Valentine. You are so lovely. I loved singing with you." And then there was also a little package of a cassette of his songs, and he'd signed it. And so I opened it, and hardly did I have a chance to look at it, but I called Jackie on the phone to tell her that I'd gotten this letter from Placido. And she said, she just a long pause, and she said, "Carly, did you really think it was from Placido?"
So she was a jokester.
She was a definite, I mean, that's a perfect example of what she did, and I've got to show you that. Here's the actual card. This is not a duplicate.
Well, she even disguises her handwriting for this purpose.
Yes,
so she was really into fooling you.
Yeah.
You say in the book that Jackie invited you to build a little cabin on her big piece of property. Was she serious, do you think?
I think she was.
Well, but you didn't do it. I mean, did you take her seriously at the time?
I did think she was really offering, and I said, "My God, no." I said, how are John and Caroline going to feel about that? And so we just laughed about it. But she asked me a second time.
She wasn't easy to be close to. I mean, she did have a wall, a barrier.
There was a certain line that I couldn't cross, that I wouldn't cross, just out of being careful. I always had a list of things that I didn't want to have to mention. I mean, I would never bring up JFK. I would never bring up a lot of the subjects that we ended up talking about because she would bring them up.
There's a really stunning couple of paragraphs where she talks about Aristotle Onassis going off on her to visit with Maria Callas. Will you just, these two paragraphs really give a read?
Oh, I thought I edited those out. She told me about how Ari made excuses when he began to see Maria Callas in secret. He wore a lot of cologne, as if it was the last stinky ride on his plane for 6 hours. I think he wanted me to know I wasn't everything to him. He didn't want to leave me completely, not entirely, in case I turned into the ideal mate he hoped he'd married.
That's a lot of acceptance.
She learned the fact that it didn't necessarily mean anything more than wham bam thank you ma'am.
You'd say she was similarly unbothered by Jack's affairs. In a cheerful but resigned way, she told me that of course she knew about them. She just didn't mind their presence as much as she might have, because she knew he loved her much, much more than any of his dalliances.
Yeah, I think that some of the things had more effect on her than that. For instance, his not being there for the birth of a child, for his being off with the mistress while she was in the hospital. I mean, there are just various things that he did that by comparison must have hurt more.
You take us as she's dying inside that apartment, inside her bedroom.
It's seared in my brain what she looked like. She was so ravishing and so wearing this little handkerchief scarf on her, paisley scarf on her head, and looking so beautiful.
You had the chance to go in and sit by her bed and hold her hand.
And told her I loved her. John was standing at the end of her bed with his hands neatly folded, and Maurice was there with his hands folded, and they were both praying over her. The record of the Gregorian chants was playing in the background. I couldn't believe that my friend was slipping away.
She was notoriously private. Did you call Caroline Did you call her daughter and say you were writing the book?
No, I didn't. I thought about it often. And I thought, well, I'll wait until it's finished and then I'll show it to her. And if she objects to anything, I'll remediate. But I never did call her. One of her Labor Day parties.
On her beach.
Yes.
There are going to be some people who say, you were her friend, she was private, and you have exposed some of her most private moments.
On the other hand, she would have been very interested in herself. And that goes along with her first mandate to me, which was to write a memoir about the interesting people that I knew. What better answer than to write about Jackie? She would have seen the perfect little sense of humor trip that it was, and loving tribute